Burn is the biggest archetype in Hexaria, and one that can not only dish out tons of damage when deck built correctly, but one that can also be reasonably used in most areas of the game. However, it can be very hard to learn all the ins and outs of the archetype. Just look at this vaguely intimidating list of all the burn cards in the game that will probably be outdated in a few weeks when another burn card is inevitably dropped in a weekly patch. It's a lot of content to figure out. So why not make a video on it? That's right, we're covering everything, as of the making of this video, about the burn archetype. From its playstyles, to its cards, to everything in between, we're going over it all, in case the length of the video didn't already imply that. Before we get into the archetype, I just want to give a huge thanks to everyone who helped with the making of this video. It was quite the journey, and the biggest project so far on the channel. You guys are awesome. Now, without further ado, this is the complete analysis of the burn archetype.
Archetype Basics.
Unlike Unstable Energy and Brawler, Burn actually has many paths you can take to make a deck around it. However, they all revolve around mostly the same thing: rush down your enemies with Burn. How exactly Burn will help in this varies on the type of deck you're going for. Burn stack is all about tossing burn on your enemies and then potentially utilizing those burn stacks for conditionals. Self-burn is all about tossing burn on yourself and or your enemies, utilizing cards which power themselves up if you're burning. Burn 2, as mentioned before in the Brawler video, is a sub-archetype of self-burn that revolves around cycling either the all 1-2, the newly released Firefists, or even both of them if you know what you're doing. And, Burn Spam is a sub-archetype of Burn Stack, where you just put every Burn Applier card in a deck and go brain off. Don't worry, we'll go more in depth about Burn Stack and Self-Burn in this video. I thought I'd mention that making a competent burn deck that isn't just brainless burn spam takes a bit of deck building knowledge and can be a process of trial and error, so be patient with it. Anyways, let's get into the first section of this video, and arguably the most important part of most burn decks: Burn Appliers. Burn Appliers are what tie most burn decks together. Whether it's activating burn stack conditionals, dealing above average damage for its cost, or acting as deck filler, you'll want to get used to using some of these in burn decks. You have a lot of options at your disposal, however they all have one thing in common: applying burn to an enemy target. I know, it's so shocking. With that out of the way, let's begin the card analysis. Easily the best generalist Burn has to offer due to it being a great option against the various health sponges present in Hexaria. Getting an enemy below half health amps up its already decent 14 damage burn for 5 turns to a 20 damage burn for 5 turns, all for 3 bits. Using it as a finisher alongside Detonate in a burn deck isn't a bad idea if you really want to wrap up a fight quickly. Running it as some basic burn application filler isn't a bad idea either. Just make sure you have the bit economy to throw them off when you need to, or you could frequently end up leaving them unused in your hand for most of the fight. No, it's not called Ignis, a card which has for the most part defied power creep due to its great stats for the cost. 2 bits for a 10 damage burn that lasts for 5 turns. Simple. You can think of it as a cheaper Swelter with no conditional nonsense attached to it. It's probably better than Swelter at being a filler burn application card due to its cheaper cost. You always know what you're getting with Ignite, and in an era where strict conditionals rule everything, that's a very good trait to have.
Freezerburn.
Now that some time has passed since its release, I can finally make a full analysis on the card and why it's amazing. Well, as long as you don't use it on Headmaster Roku. Freezerburn drops 1 duration and 2 damage off its burn effect compared to Ignite, but in return additionally applies a 10 damage, 4 turn frostbite to the target as well. It loses the consistency of Ignite, but outputs more value than Ignite if you're willing to go through the effort to proc the frostbite damage. And this is a fair trade-off. This may be troublesome if you're using Fire Spirits, which won't naturally move back, however, so it's much better suited for summonless burn decks. Overall, if you're willing to jump through a few hoops for some extra damage and want a filler card for your burn deck, Freezerburn is your best friend. I covered this previously in the gambling analysis video, so I'm just going to keep this section mostly simplified, save for discussion on its recent change. It's a direct upgrade to Ember about 50% of the time. That's all you really need to know. The odds and payout are pretty fair, all things considered. However, in the recent Burn rework, Dancing Flame got quick play, elevating the card's power even further. While Micro Meteors is obviously the premier option for rapidly throwing burn stacks on an enemy, Dancing Flame is a close second due to its cheaper cost and quick play subtype. Another really good all-around burn applier, and one you should definitely bring if you're a skilled gambler. A more consistent version of Dancing Flame, however, that's not as fun as potentially hitting it big. Although, if you do want consistency in the form of a 9 damage burn for 3 turns, Ember can be a useful tool in any burn deck you're making. There's not much else to say about it. The card has good stats for the cost and nothing more. Use it if you want, but know that for the same cost, the silly gambling card is right there. The premier turn filler for the archetype due to its versatility in the many sub-archetypes of burn, and one that got a key buff in a recent weekly, now applying a 2 damage burn for 5 turns. Due to its long duration for a burn effect, it can be a good combo starter when stacking burn on an enemy, while saving for your more heavy hitters. Applying burn is almost always going to be better than simply passing your turn. Bringing a few Scorches in your burn deck can accomplish that for you.
Heatwave.
Heatwave is where things start to get interesting for burn appliers, as it's more than just clicking on a single target and applying burn. For 2 bits, you can apply an 8 damage 3-turn burn to all enemies adjacent to yourself. If you're burning, the damage per turn is doubled to 16. If you're not burning, you're actually refunded a bit. Afterwards, the caster is handed a 4 damage 3-turn burn. This is certainly an interesting card, having 2 arguably equal good uses. You can use it as a combo starter without burn on yourself, as it's a cheap AoE burn card in that context. However, you could also use it while burn is on yourself to throw off almost AoE ignites. Of course, this is all balanced out by the recoil from the card you'll have to undergo, but it's pretty manageable with enough experience with the burn archetype. Run 1 or 2 Heatwaves if you want some cheap AoE burn and a little bit of flexibility. However, that's Heatwave. Now let's talk about the cooler Heatwave.
Overheat.
Take everything good about Heatwave and make it better. That's Overheat. At 3 bits, you can remove all burn from yourself and then apply a 10 damage 5-turn burn to all enemies and an AoE of 2 around the caster. Afterwards, you'll be handed a 5 damage 5-turn burn as recoil. Oh, also, any burn stacks you remove from yourself with Overheat contribute a little bit to the burn damage that'll be dealt to enemies. Whatever this equation is, it's used for that. If you position yourself so a couple of enemies are within the radius of Overheat before using it, you'll probably be fine when using this card. It's that simple. This is probably the first card discussed in the video that you're always going to want to run in any type of burn deck due to its very good burn removal utility and damage output packed into a single card.
Burning Mask.
Mr. Roll Compression. Burning Mask is a great way to set your burn deck up for success early on by putting some extra burn appliers in your deck for some recoil. For 1 bit, you can shuffle 4 cards that are either Ember or Ignite into your deck. In return, you'll have a 4 damage 4-turn burn applied to yourself. This card is quick play, meaning it won't take up your whole turn after using it. This card also shuffles 2 fire starters into the decks of allied fire spirits, meaning if you're running a fire spirit deck, you can turn your little fiery friends into machine guns with a little bit of setup. This alone would be good, but not great. However, Burning Mask does in fact have that extra 10% it needs to be an elite card in the archetype. This is in the form of its self-burn conditional. If the user has 2 or more burn stacks, they're refunded a bit, basically making Burning Mask cost 0 bits when on 2 burn stacks. While indirect in its burn application, it's great at it. 4 good stats for the cost burn appliers at the cost of some self-burn can justify not bringing that many standard burn appliers outside of Burning Mask in a burn deck, given you pull your Burning Masks early and then use some of them. While it's optional in a burn deck, I almost always slot it in for a reason. The tempo it can give you off its self-burn refund on top of everything else is a great assistance in both deck building and gameplay decisions.
Fizzle.
After its rework, I'd actually argue that Fizzle is pretty good now as a multi-purpose burn applier. While it doesn't have the unpredictability of Dancing Flame or the consistent duration of Ember, only clocking in at a 7 damage 3-turn burn compared to Ember's 7 damage 4-turn burn, it makes up for it with its disruption effects. If the target has a buff card in their hand, a random buff card in their hand gets reshuffled back into their deck. However, if they don't have a buff card in their hand, a 20% attack debuff is applied to them instead. Quite a lot of enemies that use attacks also don't use buffs, or not many, and Fizzle shines in those matchups. If you're willing to sacrifice some extra damage for the utility of an attack debuff or buff card reshuffle, bringing Fizzle as a filler card in a burn deck can net you a specific piece of utility that could be highly valued in specific matchups.
Combust.
Hey guys, Epic Indeed 17 here to save Craft 5 minutes of video editing by covering Combust myself. After years of irrelevancy, it's probably safe to say this card is good now. Costing 0 bits, you can apply a 5 damage 3-turn burn to a single target and choose a card to discard from your hand. If said discarded card is an effect card, the burn damage is amped up to 9 per turn. Yes, that means you can deal 27 damage over time for 0 bits with the right setup. Did I not mention that this card is quick play too?
The card pairs well with self-energy generalists like Neurotic Decoction, Corrected Insight, and Volatile Attack buff, since you can actually discard the unstable energy you get from the cards to fuel Combust's conditional. Then again, you are running self-energy cards in a burn that will clash with the goal of your deck.
A synergy that's more realistic for burn decks is pulling Embers that you don't want to use off Burning Mask, and then having the option to combust them instead to deal almost an Ember's damage for 0 bits. Combust is a card which can be powerful in the right hands, but will require some creative deck building to not find yourself mowing through your heavy hitters in the process of using it. Anyway, I have snuck my channel link into the description. Do not tell Craft I put it there.
Wow, a trap card that's not in the filler cards section? Surely it must be extremely overpowered. No. Anthill is probably the most average trap card in the game stat-wise, giving you the effects of a slightly higher cost card for a bit less. That being said, it's 27 burn damage for 0 bits, which is really good stat-wise. If you think you can make sure your Anthills get used in a fight, bring a few. That being said, I'd still just use Scorch as a turn filler for the burn archetype due to its better duration. Moving on to the cards you'll be seeing in the main 2 archetypes of Burn. Burn Stack, as noted before, is all about stacking Burn on your enemies, and then using those stacks of Burn to activate conditionals off certain cards. You want to try and find a good balance of Burn Appliers and Burn Stack conditional cards when making a Burn Stack deck. Too many Burn Appliers and you'll have a hard time getting a Burn Stack conditional card in hand when the time is right. Too many Burn Stack conditional cards and you'll have a hard time getting stacks of Burn up for them. Oh, and don't forget all the other supplementary cards such as heals and bit gains you need to bring too. Really, there's a lot of moving parts when making a Burn Stack deck. The last thing you should be worried about is what the cards do, so let's get into analyzing them.
Invoke Fire Spirit.
It's no surprise that the best summon in a burn deck is the supposed favored companion of Pyromancers across Ulbrich. While they're very useful in self-burn decks, their kit is all about stacking burn, so it goes in this section. Invoke Fire Spirit costs 3 bits. When using it on a target that isn't burning, it only applies a 3 damage 4-turn burn to the target. The main reason why you really don't want to be careless when it's time to drop a Fire Spirit down. However, when you use Invoke Spirit on a target that's burning, you actually, invoke the Fire Spirit you're paying the 3 bits for. A target that's already burning will have all their burn stacks removed, and you'll also have all of your burn stacks removed. Then, a Fire Spirit is summoned on an adjacent tile to the enemy. But wait, there's more. For every extra burn stack removed from the target, your newly summoned Fire Spirit will gain a stack of Inspire that lasts for 1 turn. Lastly, if burn was removed from yourself, your newly summoned Fire Spirit will gain a positive Enrage effect that equals the amount of burn stacks removed from you times 5. Got all that? Good, because there's going to be a quiz on it. It's pretty clear why this summon is favored in really any type of burn deck. It benefits both sides of burn. If you want a method to remove burn on yourself when running self-burn that helps you stack more burn on enemies, run Invoke Fire Spirit. If you're running a burn deck more specialized on stacking burn on your enemies than yourself, run Invoke Fire Spirit. Oh, also, if you're like me and want to be a menace by making a firing squad of Fire Spirits with Burning Mask, run Invoke Fire Spirit. It's very good if you can deal with its high cost of 3 and then keep the Fire Spirit alive, which can prove to be troublesome at times due to its low base health of 10. After all, if your Fire Spirit dies right after you spawned it, you wasted 3 bits right then and there. It's an extremely useful card in burn decks, and one you should be prioritizing to get if you don't have it and want to delve into the burn archetype.
Detonate.
Fire in the hole! Okay, now that I got that out of my system, Detonate is a must-bring in any burn deck, and the reason is simple. Why wait for DOT damage when you can activate it on command? For only 1 bit, you can remove all the burn on a single enemy and then activate 110% of all the burn damage that was on them in a form of a single instance of life loss damage. This card is also quick play, meaning it won't take up your whole turn when you use it. Believe me when I say this is very good. This is one of the most commonly recursion cards when using a burn deck, full stop, for a reason. One of the issues with DOT damage is that it takes a few turns to get all the value. With Detonate, you skip that for instant gratification if you're willing to pay the bit. It's very good if you use the team tab to check how much damage you can instantly get off Detonate. Another card you should really go for first when looking into the burn archetype, although I'd say it's easier to get than ultra rares in the Blazing Inferno card pack for some reason. One of the best burn stackers in the Subarchetype with the ability to not just apply 1, not 2, but 3 stacks of burn for 2 bits. It also deals 5 times 3 attack damage alongside the burn stacks in case you want to remove defense buffs on the target. If you're running cards which have conditionals that benefit off multiple burn stacks being present on the enemy, run this card! It saves a lot of time and deck space when attempting to reach said conditionals, and a no-brainer when making a specialized burn stack deck. If you don't, you're stupid.
Pyrocycle.
I don't know why, but for some reason, Pyrocycle is either really good or really bad. There's literally no middle ground with it. After its rework, Pyrocycle still acts as a burn duplicator, but in a different way. It now costs 1 bit and lost its quick play, but in return, it dupes a copy of the highest burn stack on the target. It's obviously going to be very good with high damage burn cards like Swelter and Burst Flare, but outside of that, it's a little more situational than the rest of the bunch.
Wisp.
The biggest homie of burn stack conditionals. Extremely simple design and good payout. It applies a 9 damage 3-turn burn to the target, as well as 1 turn of curse. However, if the opponent has 3 or more burn stacks, the curse duration is increased to 2. This card costs 2 bits. Without its conditional, it's still a bit exchange of 1 due to the curse application, so it holds its own if you somehow can't manage to stack burn in a deck full of burn cards. Now, does this mean that you should run Will-O-Wisp outside of burn? Probably not. With its conditional, however, it's one of the best Inspire neutralizers in the game. If you're sure you can get to 3 burn stacks quickly, run this card, because it's really good if you can.
Blazing Short Sword.
Blazing Short Sword is a short sword that is blazing. I know, it's shocking. Previously, it was one of the best burn stack cards due to it feeding into itself, but it recently got reworked, so it doesn't do that anymore. Now, it deals 30 damage and applies a 7 damage 4-turn burn to the target. However, if the target is burning, that burn isn't applied, the base damage goes up to 40, and the caster receives a 40% attack buff. While it did need a nerf, so it didn't feed into itself, I will admit this was a little overboard. You get 5 damage under Scimitar and a slightly better guided strike for 3 bits unconditional. I'd probably change the conditional to at the very least deal 45 damage. Above that is alright too, I guess. Until then, it's just Arcovians. For 1 bit, you can apply an 8 damage 3-turn burn to a single target. If the target has 2 or more stacks of burn, you'll also apply a 25% defense debuff. Melt is a perfectly average burn stack card, but I'd only run it if you also have stuff in your deck to utilize the defense debuffs with. Yeah, that's really it for Melt. It's pretty basic. Singe got heavily changed during the burn rework weekly patch. Instead of increasing burn damage on the target by a flat amount, it now applies a 12% burn amplification onto the target for 3 turns. Subsequent uses refreshing the duration and increasing the potency by 3%, capping out at 30%. Its cost was also lowered to 0. I would argue that Singe is meaningful competition to Scorch in the turn filler department for the burn archetype. One sets up combos and the other amplifies them. You could also just run both of them if you really like turn fillers, I don't know. It's still a little too early to tell exactly how good it is, but I think it's alright. If you're at this point in the video, I just want to say first off, congrats on having a larger attention span than the average YouTube viewer. And second, thanks for watching. If you like what you're seeing, then feel free to leave a like on the video. If you want to stay tuned for more content, then consider subscribing. I spent a lot of time script writing, voicing, video editing, and especially card formatting to make this feature-length film possible, and it would mean a lot to see some appreciation now that it's all done. Anyways, back to the video. Self-burn is your more hyper-offensive playstyle in the burn archetype. Apply burn to yourself and utilize cards that perform better when you're burning, or have specific amounts of burn stacks on yourself. It's an extremely high-risk, high-reward playstyle due to all the burn damage recoil you'll be taking, but you can deal absurd amounts of damage with it given the right deck structure and game knowledge. You'll need to find your comfort level with how all out you want to go with self-burn, something which may take a while to figure out, but will greatly help you in the process of making self-burn decks in the long run. We're kicking off this section of the card analysis with a recently added menace in deck building. No, it's not Firefists, silly, it's
Roku's teaching.
generally seen as one of the best bit gains in the game since it's a proper super boss drop. It's obviously going to translate well to self-burn. 4 turns of ignition and apply a randomized burn that is the low rolls and high rolls of Dancing Flame. Yes, this means you could low roll the duration and only get 3 usable turns of ignition instead of all 4. In an archetype with a lot of high cost cards, this thing is a lifesaver. Not even mentioning that it's a 0-bit self-burn applier, something highly valued in self-burn. Always run this in self-burn. Actually, always run it in burn as a whole.
Ignition.
2-bit meditation if it used ignition. For 2 bits, you can apply 5 turns of ignition to yourself. Yeah, that's literally it. It's a great card for your bit economy in the burn archetype if you know what you're doing, so please make sure you have burn on yourself before using this card, and then make sure you'll always have burn on yourself at the end of the turn. Run it if you have the brain cells to make sure you'll maintain burn on yourself for the full duration, and are running self-burn cards to begin with. Otherwise, don't.
Coruscate.
One of the best self-burn cards due to its simple yet effective conditional. For 2 bits, you can apply an 8 damage 4-turn burn and 1 turn of stun to the target. If you're burning, the duration of the stun is increased to 2. In a playstyle where you're going to be taking a lot of recoil damage from self-burn, the last thing you want in your hands is to be taking a lot of damage from enemies as well. Coruscate helps you with that problem to an extent, since stun immunity exists. That being said, it's not that good if you're failing to activate its conditional. I'd still run it if you have self-burn cards in your deck though. It's pretty good for what it gives you.
Reignite.
An amazing recursion card. However, believe me when I say that in the burn archetype, it gets even better. For 1 bit, you get to recursion 2 effect cards that aren't legendary rarity back into your deck, but have a 4 damage 5-turn burn inflicted onto you as well. This card is also quick play, meaning it won't take up your whole turn to use it. In an archetype where you're going to be using a lot of effect cards to either apply burn to yourself or your enemies, and some cards in said archetype power it up when you have burn on yourself, well, it's very good to say the least. You should run it in the burn archetype. It's basically a 1-cost Pocus that also amps up some of the cards you'll probably be using.
Drought.
Has had a long history of sucking. Now it's at least mediocre, which is miles better than the amount of suckage it previously had. For 1 bit, you can recursion 2 random common cards back into your deck. However, to use this card, it requires 3 or more burn stacks on yourself. The card is also quick play, meaning it won't take up your whole turn to use it. I see this as an inferior Reignite. However, that's not saying it's absolute garbage, since 1, it's better than Voltario, and 2, Reignite is one of the best recursion cards in the game, so being on par with it is a tough goal to accomplish. It's alright if you play to its strengths, but just know that Reignite is right there.
Hot hands.
Hot Hand certainly exists. It's a quick play draw card which costs 1 bit that draws up to 5 cards, but doesn't break the hand limit. It also applies a 5 damage 3-turn burn to yourself on use. However, if you're already burning, then you actually get refunded a bit. It pairs well with stuff like Dancing Flame, which is quick play, and used decently in the burn archetype. It's also really good in the burn 2 sub-archetype. Always make sure you're getting that refund when you're using it, otherwise it's kinda mediocre.
Firefists.
Greetings, those from another world. I'm a mirror world version of flying, the headmaster of this Pyromancy Academy, and here today to educate you on one of my favorite new cards, Firefists. As you all know, I consider my teachings excellent, so I only make the best types of card for my students. This card has a unique function similar to All 1-2. It has a conditional shuffle itself back into your deck. This conditional evolved, you guessed it, the caster burning to be shuffled back into their deck. Now, Headmaster Flying, you may ask, why is this card so good? First of all, I'm failing you for questioning me, and you're expelled from the Academy. And second of all, it's absurd damage output you get paired with attack modifiers. But that's not all. Don't go anywhere and uptie that ID as things are about to get even more spicy. Now that we are uptie 3, we can finally discuss what makes this card so absurdly supposedly good in Burn 2 decks. The fact that you can combine it with All 1-2 and punches via the new Stonefish trinket to get some serious firepower and dish out heavy damage every few turns. That's all we have time for today on this Mirror World flying section. I'm off to kill some Rothgarians that murdered some of my students.
You want to run this in any burn deck with a decent amount of attacks, especially if said deck contains Burst Flare. It costs 2 bits but refunds 1 if you're already burning, then applies a 45% attack modifier for 4 turns, and a 5 damage 5 turn burn to yourself. The bit refund can actually allow you to combo into a lot of self-burns attack options the turn after, such as Burning Staff and Firefists. It's a good buffing card, not much else to say. Please run attack cards with it. The best self-burn enabler in the game after getting a rework recently. Now, it's not only 0 bits, but quick play too. It applies a 4 damage 3 turn burn to yourself, but in exchange it removes all freeze and frostbite, and then applies 2 turns of freeze immunity to yourself as well as an 18% attack buff. However, this card is only usable once per turn now. In any burn deck with cards that power themselves up when you're burning, you want this card present in it too. The ability to put burn on yourself basically on command is great for the archetype, and the boons it gives you in return aren't that bad either. Really, if you aren't running this card in self-burn, you're an idiot. What are you doing?
Burst Flare.
You can look at Burst Flare as a high-risk, high-reward card in the self-burn archetype, which can act as a win con if played right. Burst Flare is unique, as the burn damage it inflicts on a target scales with buffs used on top of getting increased by 50% if you're burning. The base damage it deals is also increased by 50% if you're burning. If you set up right, you can apply an insane amount of burn on the target, and then Deto that burn the turn after for big damage. Fortunately, as we've seen previously, and as you're going to be seeing soon, Self-Burn is home to many buffing cards that can help with the lengthy process of buffing up for Burst Flare. Running Burst Flare in a burn deck is a commitment to building around it. Always bring 2 when you're running it, and always bring buff cards when you're running it. It's as simple as that.
Conjure. Blitz. Trailblazer.
CBT is a good card. Conjure, Blitz, Trailblazer takes forever to say, I'm just abbreviating it. While it costs a noticeably high 4 bits, it deals 40 damage and applies a 5 damage 4 turn burn to all enemies in a line. However, if you're burning, CBT also drops a fiery aura down on all tiles in its entire line radius, dealing 8 damage at the end of each side's turn for 4 turns. Considering the small amount of effort needed to get the conditional off, and said conditional has a pretty good payout, it's completely worth it. The only real test of skill this card has for it is lining up at least 2 enemies to make good use of its line targeting, which shouldn't be that hard if you have teammates around. It's also good at sniping runaway enemies if you want that. It's a great card in the burn archetype, and one you should be going for if you have the resources to get a full set of them.
Soothing Flame.
Soothing Flame has gotten such a meaningful rework that it gets to go before Cauterize in this video. After the burn rework, it gained quick play, its regeneration got changed to 6 potency for 5 turns, its burn got changed to 4 potency for 5 turns, and the player now gains a 30% burn resistance for 5 turns. Burn resistance is huge in a sub-archetype all about applying burn to yourself. Nothing surprising here. However, its respectable duration of 5 turns can really help you out long term. Quick play makes it so Soothing Flame doesn't eat up your whole turn, allowing you to get out of taking a decent amount of burn damage more or less on command. You know, given you have a single bit. This should be a must bring in any deck with self-burn in it.
Cauterize.
Soothing Flame if it gave up that burn resistance for a much larger heal. If you're burning, you heal 80 health for 3 bits. Simple as that. If you're not burning, you instead heal 70 health and get inflicted with a 5 damage 3 turn burn. Oh, also it removes bleed, which is currently relevant in literally one place, and that's it. The high heal it gives is a great safety net when you're taking burn damage more or less all the time with self-burn. It's another great heal card in the archetype, and you should definitely look into utilizing it if you're also bringing self-burn cards.
Hellfire.
Alright, we need to talk about Hellfire. It tries to be a staple legendary card for burn, but it falters in so many ways. Detonate is a much better staple legendary for the archetype. as it's a cheap way to activate a ton of burn instantly. Sure, it has a self-burn conditional, but for a legendary Void card, it doesn't have that high impact it previously had. Burn decks are all about spending bits on cards quickly, and an X-cost card that more or less forces you to use it at 8 bits goes against the archetype a lot. It served as a heavy-hitting legendary much better than how it's trying to fit into an archetype it no longer belongs to now. Supposedly, there's going to be a change for it soon, but only time will tell. For now, it's certainly an interesting self-burn card to say the least. Personally, I wouldn't really run this in a dedicated self-burn deck in the current state it's in.
Burning Staff.
Previously, Burning Staff was a brain-off damage card in the burn archetype that slotted well in a brawler decks too, since it was a 1-bit attack card, allowing for a 1/2 reuse. After its rework, it now multiplies its base damage roll by 50% for every burn stack on yourself, up to 150%. Yes, that's right, you can now deal even more damage with Burning Staff than before, if you have 3 burn stacks on yourself. And after the burn rework, it's not absurdly hard to accomplish this. It's the perfect addition to any burn deck that has you easily setting up multiple stacks of burn in a fight. Although there can be a little bit of luck required to have the stars align just right for massive damage. It's still a fun card though, so please try it out.
Lantern Throw.
It's now an attack card for some reason, but I'm not complaining. Just another quick play 1/2 reuse option at my disposal. Spend 1 bit to deal 15 damage to a target, but then apply a 5 damage 3-turn burn to yourself as recoil. Lantern Throw pairs decently with Burning Staff, but besides that, it's certainly a burn card that exists. Hot Sauce is right there for setting up burn on command after all. For brawler decks and especially burn 2 decks, it's probably useful, but outside of that, it's not the best option for what it provides to the player.
Burning Boost.
Burning Boost was an almost scrapped card that Lights made early in his time developing for Hexaria. However, it managed to see the light of day recently in a weekly patch. Burning Boost costs 1 bit and applies a 30% attack buff to the caster. However, if the caster is burning, this buff is applied again. Additionally, if the user has Eternal Burn on them, they'll also gain a 5 potency 5-turn regeneration effect. It's alright in the non-existent Eternal Flame archetype, but in the Burn archetype, it's a pretty good setup card for its corresponding attack options. 60% for 1 bit is a great payout for what you have to undergo for it. It's great when paired with Burst Flare, so if you're running one, then you might as well run the other. Overall, you want this in any self-burn deck with attacks present in it. I wouldn't bring Eternal Burn just to get the regeneration conditional too. It's not really worth it.
Flame Body.
Using Flame Body is basically testing if you can defeat your enemies before you defeat yourself due to all the burn stacks you'll be piling on. 1 bit, gain an attack buff that scales by 25% per stack, and then reduce all burn damage stacks by 1. While it's funny to get absurd numbers like 200% or even 250%, you really only need to get around 100% to get what I see as good usage of the card. Below 4 burn stacks, I like to play a little game called This Card Does Not Exist in My Hand. The burn damage reduction is cool, but only noticeably impactful with lots of burn stacks on yourself. Another card where if you're running it, you're basically locking in other hyper-offensive burn cards in that deck, like Burst Flare, due to its win now playstyle. That being said, if you do know what you're doing with Flame Body, it can pop off, so give it a try and see what happens.
Spicy Concoction.
I already covered this card in depth in the gambling card analysis, so I'll keep it short compared to that video. It's a gambling card which is a simple way to bypass its gamble that benefits the archetype it belongs to. It's a guaranteed 1 bit for a 30 health heal if you're already burning. However, if you're not burning, there's a 1 in 3 chance you'll get a 5 damage 3-turn burn applied to yourself. However, this 1 in 3 can actually be helpful in self-burn decks if you want to set burn up. It's a good filler heal in any self-burn deck, although it's not a card that you absolutely need to run.
Firefists.
time to discuss arguably the most polarizing change in the burn rework, Fire Axe. After being quote-unquote reworked slightly, it now requires different conditions to utilize the best. For 6 bits, you can deal 55 damage and apply a 5 damage 4-turn burn to the target, and then have 2 bits refunded. If the target is burning, you'll deal 15 extra damage and have 1 less bit refunded. If you're burning, you'll deal 15 extra damage and have 1 less bit refunded. This is a better high cost card for the burn archetype than Hellfire. However, it's not by a lot, and that's not saying much. The high bit cost with a refund gimmick doesn't work in an archetype made to rush down enemies with lots of different cards. Wait, did I say refund? You were burning when using Fire Axe and hit an enemy that was also burning, so you actually got refunded a whopping 0 bits. If I were to change this card to make it better, I'd probably keep the bit refunds on its conditionals, so you'll always get refunded 2 bits when using it. This makes it so burn decks aren't left out to dry after activating both of the card's conditionals. Currently, its design clashes a lot with the goal of the archetype, so I think twice before using it in a burn deck. Post-rework, Torch got fully revamped, so let's discuss it. For 2 bits, you can deal 20 damage and apply a 5 damage 4-turn burn to a single target. However, if you're burning, modifiers will also impact the burn damage, adding absolutely no extra damage to the burn effect since you were smart and utilized your buffs on Burst Flare instead. With cards like Firepower and Reckless Frenzy where you can get multiple uses out of its attack modifier, I suppose it could be used alongside Burst Flare, but honestly, I just bring Burst Flare and then allocate the spots Torch would have been in for cards that would bolster Burst Flare more.
Flaming Uppercut.
Brawler card, 1 bit for 20 damage. Its targeting increasing to 1 AoE if you're burning, but it'll be team kill targeting, and yes, this includes yourself. It's extremely risky in a sub-archetype where you're already taking a lot of burn damage. I see it more as a burn 2/brawler card than a self-burn card. Don't get me wrong, you can still use it in a dedicated self-burn deck, but it's just that its recoil damage can pile up fast if you're using it with its conditional. Basically, I wouldn't recommend bringing it in a self-burn deck.
Chess cards.
I'm gonna keep this really short since I covered all of these cards in the chess analysis. Alright, ready? This one is alright. This one is meh, now that base Heatwave refunds a bit on use. These two aren't really used for the burn conditional, but are still good generalists. This one exists. Got all that? Yes? No? Okay.
Filler cards. Which can kill.
The burn archetype is home to many filler cards, which you could reasonably run in the archetype. The analysis for these cards aren't going to be super in-depth, but I'll still go over the main points of running the card.
Extinguish.
The premier burn removal card due to the combination of it costing 0 bits and the quick play subtype, granting use of the card without it taking up your whole turn. The ability to hit the reset button on self-burn damage you're taking is very useful, especially if you're ever taking a little too much burn damage during a fight. In any, and I mean any burn deck with self-burn present, you want this card in it as well, and not just this card. We're talking at least a few copies of this card.
Kishuf Ward.
Extinguish, but you want either Confusion, Freeze, or Frostbite removed with it. It's more matchup oriented than Extinguish, but can help you out in areas like Snowville, where Freeze and Frostbite is prominent and you also want to remove some burn off you in a burn deck. Just make sure you don't have Inspire or Regeneration when using it.
Transfer Flame.
Fight fire with fire. For 2 bits, you can move all of your burn stacks onto an enemy target. It's that simple. While it's extremely useful in Path of Fire, outside of Path of Fire, it's mostly used for self-burn decks when things get a little toasty. Pairs well with Flame Body, allowing the player to not just remove the comically large amount of burn stacks on themselves after making good use of them with the card, but then let an enemy deal with the large amount of burn damage afterwards. Another card you're really only looking to use in self-burn decks.
Scorching Sauna.
Previously a lackluster burn applier, now it's an alright support card. Spend 1 bit to heal 20 health, then set a random burn stack on the target that's damage isn't 1 to 1. So you're probably asking now, why would I use this when I could just extinguish the burn away or use Soothing Flame for a 20 health heal? To that I say, don't worry, it does have a use case. What if you wanted to maintain multiple burn stacks while also lowering its combined burn damage? Well, Scorching Sauna allows for that. Keep your burn stacks while mitigating some of its damage in one simple card. Outside of that, just use Soothing Flame, honestly.
Inferno Blast.
was previously a worse Arcane Blast, and then got buffed to become the public executioner of Arcane Blast. 4 bits for 40 damage in the middle cell, and 25 damage on the outer cells of a 1 AoE. All targets hit also get a 5 damage, 5 turn burn applied to them. While it's a decent crowd control option, its high cost, for a burn archetype card, can hurt its usage in the archetype to an extent. Run it if you think you'll actually use it in a burn deck. Stat swapped Dynamite that goes all in on AoE and burn. Spend 2 bits to place a trap that when activated, applies a 9 damage 4 turn burn to all enemies within a 2 AoE. It's very useful against enemies that usually won't group up for 1 AoE cards. As it's a trap card, take its stats with a pinch of salt due to trap perception existing on enemies. Heatwave and Overheat are going to be much more consistent options for AoE burn application. An excellent getaway from me option. Place obstacles in a line that lasts for 6 turns. Enemies in the way of an obstacle get a 6 damage 3 turn burn applied to them instead. For what it provides, it's good. Although I don't see why you'd need to avoid line of sight in an archetype all about applying burn to targets. It applies burn, so we're covering it. I don't care. Every competent player knows this is a great crowd control card. It needs absolutely no introduction. If you want the crowd control it offers, which honestly you should want, then use it. A serviceable line attack that's more of a generalist, but its bit cost of 3 means it isn't too pricey for the archetype. 20 damage and a 10 damage 4 turn burn to all enemies hit by this attack. It's obviously going to be very good at sniping enemies from afar. However, its overall damage isn't that bad either, as long as you make sure to get 2 or more targets in range. A very good self-burn card to bring into Arrow Peaks, and its corresponding raid, since it lets you set up burn on yourself reliably for 0 bits. As long as you have an attack debuff on yourself, that is. Oh, also it removes attack debuffs from yourself, I guess, so that's cool for stuff like Burst Flare. Fun fact, Wrapped Gift can pull the Inflamed token cards. If you pull one from Wrapped Gift when using a burn deck, then congrats, you had a really good attack card without using Steel's Forge. We'll get into that mess of a card later. Wait, you're telling me you can pull Tome Scorch from Student's Tome? Who could have expected that I would have mentioned it in the video all about applying burn to people? Wow, that's amazing!
Everything else.
And then there's everything else that applies burn, which I am legally required to cover in a video about the burn archetype. These are cards that either have better options in previous sections, or just aren't practical to use in the archetype. I'll quickly go over why the card isn't the best for burn.
Fire Arrow
Exists. While yes, the aura damage can get ridiculous if you bunch up some enemies, you don't apply burn on its conditional use. For a card that costs 3 bits in the burn archetype, that's just not going to cut it. If you manage to use it on a target without burn, then cool, I guess? I mean, this is kind of fair because of the whole feeding into itself thing that Blazing Short Sword had. Whatever. 99% of the time, it's just not worth it in a dedicated burn deck.
Fireball. The following section has been made by the average Hexaria feedbacker. Viewer discretion is advised.
Wow, guys! Fireball can hit 7 enemies, dealing 280 damage for 3 bits. You're very broken, so you know what? I think you need to get banned from a piece of content. Okay, give it a second. Give it a second. Fireball's absurd potential is so overwhelming that it needs to be banned from a piece of content that doesn't exist yet. Okay, jokes aside, it falls off hard late game. Literally just use Fire Breath, it's not that deep.
Meteor Strike.
Meteor Strike, while being a spectacular crowd control generalist, which could easily be analyzed in depth in its own video, still costs 6 bits at the end of the day. A little pricey for the burn archetype. I wouldn't use it in a burn deck.
Inferno Wand.
Inferno Wand got gutted because of PvP balancing at the time. It never fully recovered after that. It's outclassed by Micro Meteors, both in burn application and overall damage.
Dynamite.
Another great generalist that underperforms in the burn archetype, this time it having a large emphasis on life loss damage. Blaze Rune and Anthill do the job much better in terms of a burn application trap card.
Kindling Fury.
Glue Strat, not useful in the Burn archetype because defense buffs are non-existent in Burn's toolset, and Kindling Fury basically requires a specific deck to utilize well, something that will obviously clash with the concept of making a Burn deck. Don't run it in the Burn archetype.
Improvised explosives.
I take that back, Dynamite. You're not the worst trap card available in the Burn archetype, because that goes to your early game counterpart, Improvised Explosives. If you want to use trap cards in a Burn deck, the moment you get access to any other trap card that applies Burn, just switch it out.
Heated sparks.
A card people have wanted a buff for some reason, despite it very obviously being an early game card. Just like Improvised Explosives, instantly switch it out the moment you get Ember, Dancing Flame, etc.
Steel Forge.
It's time for a pop quiz. In Burn decks, how much usage does Steel's Forge have? Is it A, 5%, B, 19%, C, 35%, or D, infinity? 5 seconds on the clock, leave your answers in the comments. Time's up. The answer is D. How so? Well, if you crop out half of the infinity sign, you'll actually get a whopping 0 usage! Rant time! Steel's Forge is the least impactful card in the Burn archetype, a fitting nod to Steel being the least impactful enemy in the 2023 Pyro Trio Hidden Wave. Don't get me wrong, the 2 other upgrade cards in Toxic Code and Icy Sigil have their shortcomings, but they only need small changes in the form of increased card compatibility and unique effects for Toxic Code, and Icy Sigil giving more of an impact to its corresponding cards. Steel's Forge, on the other hand, has so many issues with it that you could call it a CK update. 1 bit and then banishing the selected card is too expensive to use reliably when all of its compatible cards cost 2 or more bits. Okay, so I inflamed the token card. Surely the effects are going to be useful. Not quite. The token cards have nothing special going for them besides Blacksmith's Hammer, and the token cards looking flashy. And it's not like Steel's Forge is plug and play. You have to designate lots of deck space for viable at best and mediocre at worst cards, bloating your deck with basic attack cards, and then on top of that, you have to fish out a Steel's Forge to use it. Okay, but surely these problems would be addressed in the Burn rework, right? Nope, a 25% attack buff does nothing to fix the card fundamentally. You want to know how to fix Steel's Forge? Either make it cost 0 bits, the downside is banishing the selected card, or give all the token cards meaningful and unique effects. The sky's the limit with what you could throw on the token cards. Just give them something. However, until then, Steel's Forge is hot garbage, pun entirely intended.
Supplementary cards, which can kill.
It's time to go over your out-of-archetype cards that you tend to run inside the archetype, and why you'd run them. While Burn has a lot of deck niches already built into the archetype compared to other archetypes, there's still some things outside of the archetype you might want to look into bringing.
Heals.
With supplementary heals, you're not looking for self-heals outside of the archetype, but rather team heals. Seriously, Burn already has Spicy Concoction, Soothing Flame, Cauterize, and even Scorching Sauna for team heals. You're already covered in that department. Anyways, Horn of the Unicorn and Bishop's Benevolence are great consistent options if you're not comfortable with utilizing obliged offer scaling in a Burn deck.
Card draws. And tutor cards.
Let's be honest, unless you're running a good deal of quick play and or self-burn in your Burn deck, you might want another type of card draw in your Burn deck. While Agonized Greed is great as always, if you're running Combust, you might actually want to pick up Kishuf Overdrive due to it giving you safe Combust fuel to use alongside it. Oh, also Accelerata can help you out with self-burn decks that utilize stuff like Burst Flare, which are hard to fish out in a 50-card deck. As for tutor cards, the commonly used options are unsurprisingly great in Burn decks too. Conjure, Demon Lore, and your hand rerolls in Mask of Uncertainty and Lunatic's Reposts are pretty good in the context of Burn decks.
Subarchetypes.
That's right, we're not done yet, as we have some sub-archetypes to go over too. While Burn Stack and Self-Burn are the main playstyles of Burn, there's some more specific deck structures you can go for when crafting a Burn deck. What I'll be discussing will range from commonly known playstyles in the community to deranged theory crafting that I tried out a few times in the game and it sounded good on paper. However, I'm not the type of person to just show a sample deck, as that ruins the fun of deck building yourself. However, for this section, I'll provide a tier list graphic for what cards I find to be prioritized more or less in creating a deck for that subarchetype. As Firefists is going to play a huge role in this subarchetype section, we've acquired some fitting drip for the footage. Let's begin with a subarchetype I've already mentioned a few times in the video and some past videos, Burn 2. Burn 2 is what happens when you combine the consistent DPS of Brawler with the hyper-offensive nature of Self-Burn. Cycle the old 1-2 with cards that apply burn to yourself, such as Hot Sauce, and cards that are powered up with burn, such as Burning Staff. The damage you can get from this is kind of absurd, but may require some luck to pull that off. Obviously, you're going to want to run the old 1-2, however after that, the options you could bring branches off a lot. You'll want bit gains, tutors, and card draws. Honestly, this is for basically every section here. That's a given. However, you have a lot of options for 1-bit attacks you could bring to Recursion 1-2. I forgot to put Battlemaster Strike on here, just assume it is. You could also bring Firefists if you feel like you have enough self-burn application to reliably cycle it alongside 1-2, although this is entirely optional. Really, you'll find Burn 2 is both flexible and strict in its deck building. You're forced to bring 1-bit attack cards to reshuffle 1-2, but everything else for the most part is flexible. It's still fun to use, try it out and go nuts.
Firefist.
Burn 2 without the 1-bit attack cards, and with a much larger emphasis on setting up and utilizing self-burn. First off, it's no surprise that Firefists is the most important card to run in a playstyle that's all about cycling it. While you can run Firefists in a Burn 2 deck, you can't quite run 1-2 in a Firefist deck, since the first thing you'll notice when making a Firefist deck is that 1-bit attack cards aren't really preferred in it. Instead, you can swap those out for other cards which power up from self-burn, since most of the time you'll be burning when using this playstyle. CBT and Burst Flare are your go-to picks for this. Soothing Flame will play a much larger role in Firefist decks than Burn 2 decks, due to the playstyle's entire dependency on self-burn, and should more or less be an auto-include for it. When using a Firefist deck, I try to get an Accelerata in hand as soon as possible, with either some top deck luck or tutors, and then utilize it, with its conditional of course, to get my self-burn dependent attacks in my hand fast. It really helps the playstyle get going early so you aren't wasting self-burn setup cards.
Combust Cycle.
Take brainless burn spam and add some strategy and stupidity to it. That's Combust Cycle. Straight from the depths of my unhinged theory crafting, Combust Cycle is all about playing as many combusts as possible, using the least valuable effect cards possible for its fuel. Combusts are obviously going in the deck, however, what about fuel cards? Well, we actually have a reliable source of safe combust fuel, unstable energy. Kishuf Overdrive and Corrupted Insight are amazing options to get unstable energies into your deck while providing some utility on the side for you. You're going to want to set up your self-energy early, followed by getting combusts in your hand, alongside some unstable energy of course, or other fuel such as Burning Mass cards. Then, start throwing off your combusts. Munitions Pack is a great pick for this playstyle due to it only recursioning common cards. If you do run Munitions Pack and Combust Cycle, try to keep common cards in your deck outside of Combust at a low number, so you can have a better chance at getting your Combusts back. Combust Cycle admittedly does lose steam later in a fight, but it can pop off in the early turns of a fight, so it balances out. And just a heads up, this playstyle also relies a slight bit on starting hand luck and game knowledge to work correctly. If the thinkers don't want to add hyper-offensive Eternal Flame, then I'll do it myself. Take the absurd self-sustain of Eternal Flame, and then combine it with the DPS of Self-Burn to potentially get the best of both worlds. And it's not like Eternal Flame is a deck-heavy archetype. It doesn't even have a full archetype. This makes it somewhat acceptable to pair with Self-Burn. Remember when I said you shouldn't run Eternal Burn to just get both conditionals off of Burning Boost? Well, I never said you shouldn't run both Eternal Burn and Burn to not just get both conditionals off of Burning Boost. The claws and the various buffing tools of Burn are going to be your best friends here. I haven't tried this playstyle out a lot, but in my various deck testing sessions, it went alright enough to justify discussing here. So take the viability I've described of this playstyle with a pinch of salt.
Concluding thoughts.
Wow, that sure was a lot. Ever since the Burn rework, the Burn archetype has flourished, letting players really get creative with their deck building when using it. However, what is there to learn from the video? Don't make a full analysis on the Burn archetype, it's not worth it. Okay, seriously. Burn is a very flexible archetype due to its mostly viable set of cards. A lot of Hexaria's archetypes as of now are very restrictive in what cards you need to bring to make the archetype work, Poison being the most obvious one. Burn doesn't have that issue due to its wide variety of useful cards in each of its playstyles. You aren't running the same 30-40 cards plus your supplementary cards in every Burn deck, and that's great for players. And it's not like flexibility is the only thing Burn has going for it, because its output is great too. That being said, give Burn a shot, try out its various playstyles, and have some fun with it. See ya.